Good morning and welcome to today's administrative meeting of the Public Service Commission. Before we get started today, we have some minutes from the June 19th meeting, which we had a few weeks ago. If the Commissioners had an opportunity to review the minutes, is there a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move we adopt the minutes from the June 19th administrative meeting.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
The minutes are approved. Madam Secretary, the consent docket.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. On the consent agenda, there are 5 items. The first item is Delmarva Power and Light Company, filed on June 19, 2019. Revised tariff pages. The company proposes to update environmental surcharge and request for a waiver of the 30-day notice period required under Public Utilities Article 4-203A. But the second item is Potomac Electric Power Company, filed on June 21, 2019. Revised tariff pages. The company proposes to revise the environmental surcharge and Montgomery County tax and the Prince George's County energy tax, and a request for a waiver of the 30-day notice required under Public Utilities Article 4-203A. The third item is the Potomac Edison Company, filed on June 21, 2019. Revised tariff pages. The company proposes to make a revision to the Montgomery County fuel tax local tax adjustment. Item 4 is Washington Gas Light Company, filed on June 24, 2019. Its revised Montgomery County fuel energy tax surcharges. The fifth item is Washington Gas Light Company, filed on June 24, 2019. Prince George's County energy tax notice of a rate decrease applicable to fuel under CB-27-2019, Section 5.
Thank you. Do the Commissioners have any questions? I have a question for staff, actually, with respect to these Montgomery County energy taxes and the Prince George's energy taxes. Mr. Patterson, good morning. As a resident of Prince George's County, I see that the Prince George's County tax per, let's say, 1,000 kWh is it's noticeable. It sort of rivals the Empower surcharge. I recognize there's a distinction between Prince George's, who charges the tax directly on the user, and Montgomery County, who, as I understand it, charges it on the utility. Is that correct? Is that the distinction between the way the two counties collect the tax?
That's my understanding. Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Can you explain how Montgomery, what do? They actually charge the utility first, and the utility just passes it through to the customer?
It's staff's understanding that Montgomery County company has to pay the tax to Montgomery County regardless of whether they collect it or not. So when you look at the calculation of it, that's why you see that it's adjusted for Public Service Commission's assessment. Prince George County's tax is what they collect is what they remit to them.
Thank you. So the utility in Montgomery County is on the hook for any uncollectible taxes from its customers.
Utility in Prince George County is on the hook.
Prince George, that's right, because its
Right.
ratepayers are liable. Thank you for that explanation.
Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Is there a motion on these 5 items?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. For item number 1, I would move that we accept the tariff revision of the Maryland Environmental Surcharge Rate and revised tariff leaf number 45 for filing with an effective date of July 1st, 2019, and grant a waiver of the 30-day notice period required by Public Utilities Article Section 4-203A. For items numbers 2 through 5, I move that we note the filing with an effective date of July 1st, 2019, and grant a waiver of the 30-day notice period required by Public Utilities Article Section 4-203A.
Thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? The motions are approved.
Turning to the administrative agenda, item number 6 is Piney Orchard Utility Company, LLC, filed on June 3, 2019. Notification of transfer of control in the Piney Orchard Wastewater Treatment Plant, Odenton, Maryland, to Anne Arundel County, Maryland.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Lloyd Spivak for the Commission staff. This is a filing by the Piney Orchard Utility Company, LLC, notifying the Commission of its intent to transfer control of the Piney Orchard Wastewater Plant to Anne Arundel County. Piney Orchard also seeks revocation of its authorization to provide wastewater service in Anne Arundel County, which the Commission granted to Piney Orchard in Commission Order Number 81527 and Case Number 9113, dated July 20th, 2007. Per Public Utilities Article Section 101 E, 1-101 EE, excuse me, a privately owned sewage disposal company is a public service company. Public Utilities Article Section 5-202 requires a public service company to obtain prior authorization of the Commission to assign, lease, or transfer a franchise or a right under a franchise, enter into any agreement or contract that materially affects a franchise or a right under a franchise, or abandon or discontinue the exercise of a franchise or a right as a whole or in part. In its order authorizing the transfer of Piney Orchard Wastewater Incorporated in 2007, the Commission noted that one of the assets being transferred to the company at that time was the franchise. Piney Orchard has entered into an agreement with Anne Arundel County to sell the Piney Orchard Wastewater Treatment Plant located in Odenton, Maryland. Upon sale of the treatment plant, Piney Orchard will no longer own or maintain a facility for the disposal of sewage and will therefore cease to be a public service company subject to the Commission's jurisdiction. The county submitted a joint letter with the company to the Maryland Department of the Environment, which they have copied in their filing here, stating that the county will assume responsibilities and liabilities under the wastewater discharge permit upon completion of the transfer. Because there will be no change to rates and services, customers will experience no change as a result of the sale of the treatment plant. Staff concludes that the transfer of control of the plant to the county is consistent with public convenience and necessity. Staff recommends that the Commission approve the transfer of the Piney Orchard wastewater plant from Piney Orchard to Anne Arundel County and revoke the authorization granted to the company to provide wastewater services in Anne Arundel County.
Thank you, Mr. Spivak. It looks like you're pinch hitting for Mr. Gregor this morning.
That is correct.
Is there counsel for the applicant?
Yes, sir. Eric DeVito. I'm actually counsel and a member of the entity that is transferring the plant to Anne Arundel County.
Thank you, Mr. DeVito. Do you have anything additional to add, what Mr. Spivak just explained to the Commission?
I do not. Staff report, I think, captured it well. The only thing I would say to you is that the full transfer is scheduled to take place on July 8th. And I think right now the staff's recommendation to make it effective as of today, but for your purposes, if for whatever you do today, just I wanted you to be aware that the full transfer of control is slated to occur on Monday.
Monday, okay. Originally, the closing was supposed to be when, June 30th?
30th, correct.
Okay, so it's just been delayed by a week.
It was actually delayed to allow this hearing to occur.
Ah, okay, I understand. Do commissioners have questions?
Just a quick question, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Spivak, you said that the rates won't change, so there's no impact on the ratepayers. Is that for some specified period of time, or how does that work?
I'm not aware that it has been that any period of time has been specified. I would also note that, in fact, once the plant is under the control of the county, the rates are no longer subject to commission jurisdiction. But I also note that the rates originally were subject to county approval, or really basically were set by the county anyway. So I don't think it's going to change in that regard.
Mr. DeVito?
If I could add, we did not have rate-making authority. We were exempt from rate-making authority because we just passed through the rates that the county charged. We are in essence a wholesale sewer provider. The county actually bills the customers now and did for the past 12 years. They bill them at the county rates, and then the county pays us for the sewer services we provide. So the ratepayers will, in essence, see no change at all, not even in billing.
Okay. Well, that explains a lot then. So there is literally no impact on the ratepayers.
Exactly.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Is there a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the transfer of the Piney Orchard wastewater plant from Piney Orchard Utility Company, LLC, to Anne Arundel County, and revoke the authorization granted to the company to provide wastewater services in Anne Arundel County.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion is approved.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Item number 7 is the Potomac Edison Company, filed on May 29, 2019. It's revised electric vehicle charging infrastructure pilot plan, case number 9478.
Let's have the parties join us at the table. If we could have a representative from OPC at the table as well. If we have additional utility personnel, you could always take a podium.
Good
Did we
morning.
lose a seat? No, okay, all right. It looked like we had a gap there. Mr. Raker, you don't want to get too close to the utility. Thank you. Counsel for the commission.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Annette Garofalo, on behalf of Commission staff. Just a summary of our comments. We do recommend that the Commission accept for filing Potomac Edison's compliance filing with order number 88997 and case number 9478. These are tariffs that will be effective on July 31, 2019. The tariff pages address the various directives in the Commission's order. Staff recommends the Commission accept the tariff pages for filing to be effective July 31, 2019, with the following modifications. First, staff recommends that PE refile its tariff to remove the condition that the rebate is for 50% of the cost of the charger and installation up to $300, and state that the rebate is a flat $300. Second, Potomac Edison has also included a voluntary off-bill kilowatt-hour credit to be applied to residential customers who wish to participate in the program. The customers will be credited for net off-peak EV charging. Staff recommended in its comments against the off-peak EV charging, off-peak kilowatt-hour credit, and its staff's understanding that PE intends to delete the provision from its tariff. Third, PE has not listed the rate customers will be charged at utility-owned public EV charging stations. PE has also stated that the rate may vary by public EV charger locations, the rate will be determined by vendor, and that the rate will be market-based and updated quarterly. Staff agrees the rates should be market-based for now and that rates should be corrected regularly. In the future, staff recommends that all public charging station rates be based on cost and not market rates. This should be determined in a future rate case, and staff recommends that PE charge the same rate across all public EV charging station and use the rates the other utilities have established unless evidence can be provided that PE's market rate should be different. Finally, staff notes that in the original petition, PE stated it would own 50 L2 chargers and 9 DC FC chargers. PE is now requesting that these amounts be flexible to account for customer requests. PE is still requesting to own 59 L2 and DC FC chargers combined, but the company is requesting that the ratio be based on customer interest. Staff recommends that an upper limit of 20 DC FC chargers be set, which is approximately 1/3 of all the utility-owned charging stations. So
Thank
we
you.
do recommend, but with those corrections.
Thank you for those recommendations. Utility.
Yes, we have a presentation on our compliance filing, if that is what the commission would like us to go forward with.
Please.
My name is Teresa Harold, and I'm here on behalf of the Potomac Edison Company. I'm going to introduce my colleagues who will be presenting today's presentation. Neil Keating is to my left, and he's a senior business analyst in our Emerging Technologies Group. Ray Valdez, Director of Rates and Regulatory Affairs, is at the podium. And as needed, Mark Zuka is behind me. He's a supervisor of engineering services, project and portfolio management. And now I'll turn things over to Neil to get us started.
Hi, good morning. I'll step through the Potomac Edison EV pilot programs. First up, we have the residential rebate program. Potomac Edison plans to offer 1,000 rebates to residential customers who purchase and install an eligible smart level 2 charger. The proposed rebate amount is 50% of the cost of equipment and installation, up to $300. But we've noted that staff recommends a flat $300 rebate, and Potomac Edison can comply. Customers are not required to obtain rebates from other organizations in order to qualify for a Potomac Edison rebate. The rebates are available on a first-come, first-served basis, and all customers are eligible regardless of their shopping status with a competitive electricity supplier.
Good morning, Ray Valdez. Just want to touch real briefly on the residential off-bill credit. As staff has mentioned, we initially included that in our filing. It was based upon a net off-bill kilowatt-hour usage, but based upon the comments from the parties, as well as the Commission's determination in the Exelon proceeding addressing this same issue, the companies have agreed to withdraw this from consideration in this filing.
Moving on to the multi-unit dwelling rebate, Potomac Edison plans to offer 50 rebates to multi-unit dwelling customers who purchase and install eligible smart Level 2 and DC fast chargers. The rebate is for 50% of the cost of equipment and installation up to $5,000. Customers are not required to obtain rebates from other organizations in order to qualify for a Potomac Edison rebate. They're available on a first-come, first-served basis, and all customers are eligible regardless of their shopping status with a competitive electricity supplier. And last of the programs, we'll talk about the utility-owned public charging program. Potomac Edison proposes to install, own, and operate up to 50 smart Level 2 and 9 DC fast chargers on government-owned property. Potomac Edison is seeking additional flexibility to install more than 9 DC fast chargers within the original budget, with a corresponding decrease in the number of Level 2 chargers, based on customer requests or in order to promote the objectives of the pilot. EV chargers users will be charged a market-based rate, and the rates will be reviewed on a quarterly basis and listed on Potomac Edison's website. Potomac Edison will work with government officials throughout the service territory to ensure geographic diversity of EV charger installations. And last, just to touch on customer education and outreach and also collaboration. We plan for our customer education and outreach budget to be 5% of the pilot program budget. All of our currently developed marketing and education materials have been reviewed by the PC44 EV work group and Maryland EVIC, and we're committed to circulating our final marketing and outreach materials to the work group and EVIC for review. And lastly, around collaboration, we're coordinating with BGE and PHI to release a joint RFP for an EM&V vendor.
That concludes our presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Keating. It appears that the presentation addresses at least 2 of the 4 staff recommendations. Does the Office of People's Counsel wish to make any opening statement before the Commissioners inquire?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we did file comments in this matter. We had 3 recommendations for Commission action. With PE's removal of the proposed voluntary off-bill KWH credit program, that leaves 2 recommendations. One recommendation is for the Commission to direct PE to provide notice to the Commission, staff, and OPC at least 15 business days before the rates for PE's public EV program are first made available to the public, and then any time they are subsequently modified, including documents and work papers sufficient to substantiate the proposed rates. As staff noted, PE's proposal is a bit different. The Exelon utilities included specific rates in their tariffs. PE is proposing something different. So we have no objection at this point to the proposal, but do ask that notice is provided so that all parties can properly evaluate any revisions and the documents that substantiate the need for those revisions. And then second, we would ask that the Commission at this time deny PE's request to seek additional flexibility to install more DC fast chargers. We don't think that at this time the company has provided any substantiation as to why that flexibility is warranted. And additionally, so we had one question as to whether the request would be budget neutral, which it does appear that it is, but still there's no substantiation as to why there should be a difference and what exactly that would mean if one additional DC fast charger is installed, how many L2 chargers that would reduce, and then what that might mean about possible equity considerations. Oh, and with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Raker. I believe the commissioners probably have a number of questions. Let me just start with one to you. So you have no concerns with the rate proposal. You're seeking notice, 15 days notice of any potential change, whereas if I understood Ms. Garofalo correctly, that staff council wants to see one uniform rate across the service territory. Is it OPC's position that rates that vary by neighborhood to neighborhood is permissible?
So at this point, we don't have an objection at this time, but we would want to see the documents to substantiate that possible proposal. In Discovery, the Exelon Utilities provided information from an outside vendor that substantiated their proposed rates. At this time, we don't have that information from PE. I mean, it's certainly possible that an evaluation of current market conditions may possibly warrant something different in different parts of the territory. It's unclear. So at this time, we just don't have enough information to formulate a complete opinion on that.
At first blush, it seems, at least to me, to be reasonable to have market rates depending on whether you're in one area or another and whether there are other chargers. I just showed Commissioner O'Donnell a map of the PE region and the Panhandle. You can't find a single DC fast charger west of Hagerstown. So that's a good probably 150-mile stretch from Hagerstown to Oakland till you, what is that, I-68 or I-70? 68 till you cross into West Virginia. So I suspect that there is a need. However, for the utility, we gave final approval to the Exelon Utilities proposals just about two or 3 weeks ago, and they had specified the rate that they would charge both for level 2 charging and level 3 charging. Why should the commission not require that Potomac Edison specify the rate in the tariff of what they plan to charge?
The reason why we hadn't initially put it in was this would be something that would be determined by the vendor based upon whatever the market is determined. Ideally, it would be the same rate across our entire jurisdiction. That makes it a bit more easier administratively, but that almost assumes that the market has an identical rate across our jurisdiction, and we didn't want to foreclose a possibility that there could be a different rate. So we wanted to put that in as a caveat that the rate may change depending upon where the charger is within our service territory to ensure that it's a complement to the market and not a competitor to the market. But we don't have that rate yet from our vendor, so we don't have that market rate.
Can you tell me more about the vendor, who the vendor is, and why it appears that the utility is contracting out that determination to the vendor, whereas we had other utilities provide a specified rate in their tariff?
We expect to be able to calculate that rate internally. We want a vendor to also look at that calculation, just have a third party, sort of doing a sanity check on that rate. But we are in final negotiations with vendors from our RFP, which we already conducted. We just haven't selected a vendor yet. But we also have the capability internally to calculate that public charging rate and expect to include that rate for you in our August 1st semi-annual filing.
So we'll see that on August 1st. We'll see all the utilities filing the cost numbers on August 1st. But is the utility opposed to providing a rate or a range of rates for public charging in its tariff?
We could certainly put that in if so determined by the commission.
Because that would provide a sort of a collar and a floor for both the L2 and the L3 charging. All right, I have a number of questions, but let me allow my colleagues to ask some. Commissioner O'Donnell.
I wanted to follow up on the cost for these EV fast chargers, so the 59 number being malleable. OPC alluded to it. They said I think you said you thought it would be cost neutral. Was that right, Mr. Raker?
We initially had a question about that, but it seems that based on the presentation, the company has asserted that it will be cost neutral.
Can you clarify? Would company clarify that for me? Because my sense is that these DC fast chargers are much more expensive than
Yes, that's correct. Based on what what the commission approves today, we will have the final cost numbers in our August 1st filing, and certainly additional flexibility in DC fast chargers would increase our budget to account for the additional costs associated with the
Any
charger.
ballpark on what that would do to the number if you went to 20 DC fast chargers?
I think, just ballparking, the number, it was one DC fast charger for every 10 level 2.
Okay. All right, well, certainly a need for DC fast chargers unless you want to spend the night at the local bed and breakfast, so.
Amen. Commissioner Herman.
So I'm a little confused because I thought I had it. I thought it was, we had a budget, and if you were going to have more fast chargers, you were going to have fewer L2 chargers. Am I incorrect?
That's correct,
Okay.
but because the cost of a DC fast charger is so much higher than a level 2 charger, the budget for the public program would go up necessarily.
All right, you're just saying two different things here. So, like, I thought if you were going to do fewer L2s because you did more fast chargers. I mean, so, but you're saying, no, I want to do more fast chargers and keep the L2s the same?
It would be 59 total, so if we installed 20 DC fast chargers, the remaining 39 would be level 2.
Oh, so the number's staying the same. The budget's not staying the same.
Correct.
Okay. Because originally, it sounded to me like you were saying the budget stays the same. Mr. Valdez, is the budget the same or no?
I'm sorry.
You don't know? Okay,
been
you're
involved
not,
in that
all right. So that you're expecting the budget to go up, the approved budget to go up?
Correct. We have the budgets we've included in our compliance filing are based on our initial filing that we made in January 2018, as well as the preliminary RFP results. But the final negotiations, which will include whatever the commission approves here today, will govern that final budget we include in the August 1st filing.
But you haven't given us a final budget that would include the more fast chargers, have you?
No, that's correct. I believe the budget in
The bu-
our filing is
The budget in the filing includes 50 level 2 and 9 DC fast.
Mr. Herman, can I jump in? Because looking at the presentation here, you said PE seeking additional flexibility, but will stay within the original budget. So it was my understanding that you'd have more DC fast charges, but you'd have to reduce the number from 59 to 30 to capture that. But it says, I'm reading the page here on this slide, slide number 5.
And that was our understanding as well, based on the presentation, but in the filing it was unclear. And just one comment, that if indeed the budget is going to be increased by every additional DCF, that certainly places more risk on all ratepayers.
And I think that's the concern you're hearing from at least 3 of us right now. So bullet number 2, second line, we're going to stay within the original budget. But obviously you can't do that if you swap out L2s for L3s.
That's correct. I think we just misused the word budget here. We're referring to a 59 budget as opposed to dollars budget. So I
Okay.
apologize for the confusion there. Based on our current understanding of the costs, we would need to increase the estimated budget for the public program.
But you don't know, well, we just heard from Mr. Keating that it could be as much as 10 times the cost.
If we were replacing all the...
Every one.
Yeah, correct. I don't know demand for DC fast chargers yet, so...
Well, with that being said, I'm more sympathetic to staff's position where we should set some type of a... I see the need. We have no chargers in a 100-mile interstate corridor in PE service territory. But by the same token, while I don't expect you to use all 59 budgeted chargers for L3s, I think we would need to put some limit to contain costs as OPC is recommending. And maybe 20 is a nice round number, but I'm glad Commissioner O'Donnell and Herman drilled down a little further on this question.
So do you have a number that you would feel comfortable with if the commission were to accept the staff recommendation that we limit? Is 20, does 20 sound like a potentially a reasonable number?
20 does sound like a reasonable number. That's, I think, where we predict our program ending up. However, we wanted to stick with our position that flexibility would be the preferable method. We would keep the commission updated in semi-annual reports, and if there's a real need for additional chargers, to state that to the commission and potentially move forward with additional chargers over the course of the pilot.
Well, the purpose of the pilot is for us to learn, and I suspect that if you discover that you need additional DC fast chargers, you could
Right.
come back. But I'm not hearing you say out of the 59 you need 40 at this point. You're still doing your research and your outreach. So I personally believe that we need some controls here.
So,
Just one point of clarification, 20 also just seems like a pretty vague number without any real information to substantiate it. If the company was to come back with information that so many of its public clients are requesting chargers with a cost attached to that, then the commission can make an informed decision at that
Oh,
time.
the utility will need to support these chargers and where they're located. Right now, I think there is a need. You don't see any private charging companies working in your service territory in that panhandle region, so they're not getting in there for a reason. But yes, Mr. Raker, to your point, we need some justification if we're going to allow for recovery down the road. And we'll see on August 1st, some of the books will be revealed to us in less than a month.
So I have a question for staff.
Sure.
Are you suggesting that PE charge the same 18 cents and 34 cents that Pepco and BGE and Delmarva are charging, or are you just saying they should charge a one rate across their service territory?
Well, both. Because they didn't provide a rate to make it simpler, we're saying
Uh-huh.
because their program is to be effective July 31st because of the time crunch, we're saying because those rates are essentially statewide, they should have the same unless they can provide information that the market is somehow different in Western Maryland. And if they can provide that information, we'd be happy to change that rate. But because they didn't provide any information on where the rate is or where it will be, for ease of use for Maryland ratepayers, we thought it'd just be easier to make it the same across the state. So
Well,
yes.
I guess I'm a little confused by that because it seems to me that I might very much expect, if I'm buying gasoline, I might very much expect to pay a different price for gasoline in Hagerstown that I would pay in Wheaton. So why does staff think it? Why is there a uniformity here? I mean, aren't the rates that PE's customers pay for electricity are very different than the rates that BGE or Pepco or Delmarva charge?
Sure. Well, I guess I would say we've determined that the rate should be the same across the utility, which gas prices can differ within, say, BGE's service territory. It's really just for ease of use for the customers. I mean, these rates are just based on the market. There's not, and I believe what the Exelon companies did was a market based across the whole state of Maryland for EV chargers, not just specifically their service territory.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, if PE can provide information that their rates should be lower, like, for example, their distribution kilowatt-hour charges compared to the rest of the state mostly, we'd be fine to accept that. But because they didn't come up with a rate and they want this to be in effect July 31st, we needed a rate to be approved in the tariff. Condition 19 of the commission order said that the utility should develop a new rate class for the EV charging stations and submit tariff proposals that describe the rights and estimated charges for EV customers, including public charging. So, again, I think the customers need to know what they'll be charged. And again, for the difference in vendor within the territory, again, I guess you could bring the gas analogy again, but a customer in Hagerstown and a customer in Frederick are charged the same distribution kilowatt-hour charge in PE's territory. So again, I don't see why they should have a different rate between each charging station within their own territory. But if the commission determines that's appropriate.
Would the notice provision that OPC has requested provide some additional comfort in your staff's view?
I mean, 15 days is extremely short, in my opinion. Again, I believe the order stated that they should have the rate in the tariff, so customers are well aware what that rate would be when they pull up to a charging station.
Okay, thank you.
Follow up on that line of questioning, if I might. Why should the commission accept your proposal to allow the vendor to determine the rate in, essentially in perpetuity? If we approve this, why is it in the public interest? I mean, we're sticking these public chargers in government-owned or controlled properties. They're public use. Why should we let some vendor kind of change these rates whenever they want to, out of our view?
Well, the vendor analysis, the reason why we wanted the vendor to take a look at this is they have a lot more experience in this than we do. We're just starting out with these public EV chargers. And so even though we can do an analysis on our own, we also wanted an analysis done by the vendor who has a lot more experience and is a lot more familiar with it than we have, and to ensure that our two analyses are reasonable and are reflective of the market.
Right. I mean, I appreciate that. I heard you say that earlier, but why is it in the public's interest to allow a vendor to charge whatever he discretionarily decides he or they want to charge? I mean, they could. There's no chargers out there, so they could theoretically charge whatever they wanted. It'd be out of our view, and that doesn't seem to be in the public interest.
We should clarify, it's a separate vendor from the charging station vendors themselves. This would be what we're calling a separate EM&V vendor who's exclusively engaged to determine this public charging rate. So they have no independent interest in determining the charging rate. But at the same time, we do have the in-house capability to calculate this rate.
That's fine, but the essence of my question still isn't answered.
Sure.
If I understand your question correct, if you're saying that, for example, the far western edge of our territory, where there's a lack of chargers, the vendor couldn't pick a number out of the air or pick a highly inflated number. The basis would have to be where the chargers are. And to the extent that there's chargers in, say, Frederick or Hagerstown, that would have to be the basis for determining what the market is, because that's where our market is. And until a market develops in far western Maryland, we would have to use the chargers that we have within our territory as the basis for determining what the market is.
Right, but I guess what I'm thinking is, if I'm Commissioner Stanek and I want to take a day trip to West Virginia, I may pay through the nose when I get to the Oakland area under your submittal.
If for example, there's none in the Oakland area, then the rate charged in Oakland would be the same as the rate charged in, say, Frederick and Hagerstown. It wouldn't be different, because there would be no other market to base it on.
All right, I got to tell you, it's a little discomforting to leave rates be controlled outside of the normal system of setting electricity rates. Can you give me another example where we do this? We just cede control of the rates to somebody else?
I'm trying to think of another example where there's a, based upon a market. I think earlier in the early in this admin meeting, there was discussion about the charges charged for Montgomery County and Prince George's County. That's determined by whatever those entities determine as far as what their appropriate rate is. And then the utilities charge that same rate. This is a similar concept as the market that is charging in Frederick and Hagerstown would, at this time, probably determine what the market rate is.
I'm a big supporter of competitive markets and pricing, although this all this talk of the vendor is a little unsettling to me. Number one, we have no regulatory oversight of the vendor. We have regulatory oversight of the utility. It sounds more like maybe this is an expert witness or a consultant that you're going to be relying on to determine competitive pricing. But having no cap, despite a notice provision, and I don't know how the utility feels about the notice provision, but if OPC is seeking 15 days, that doesn't seem unreasonable every time a price is changed. Utility could respond to that if they want, but I do believe that if we have a rate in the tariff, and I know the utility is not proposing that, but I think that's where we need to go. We'll need to have some floor and ceiling. Commissioners have other comments on the rate issue?
I also want to understand, did you say that there would be a possibility of different rates depending on the station location. Is that what you were saying as well, that there might be a differentiation between a rate at, one place, let's say you had something at Sidling Hill and then, something in Oakland? So you're talking about differentiation between the different locations?
Yes, that's only if the market has determined that it needs to be. Like, say, for example, if we have a higher rate in our eastern portion of the territory and a lower rate in the western portion, if you do an average, you could certainly do an average, and then the rate charge in the eastern part of our territory will be probably a little bit too low and may hurt competition, and the rate charge in the western part of the territory may be a little bit too high and may disincentivize customers to go to that. That's why we weren't necessarily proposing that it should be a rate separated throughout our jurisdiction, but only if market forces dictate that it need to be, would we be given the flexibility to have that.
Okay. Well, I guess, Brian, I'm interested in this concept. I think it is an important, consideration in setting rates. I just don't feel like, at this point, for me, we don't have enough information on how that would work, other than, just what we're hearing today. Right now, it seems like the more uniform approach that we've adopted already might be better. But I'm still interested in considering to flesh out this concept a little more at some point in the future.
And as the chairman mentioned, as this is a pilot, this is something that we continue to evaluate, especially with the semi-annual filings.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so how we're going to handle this?
Are we doing any more questions?
Yeah, we'll have more questions. But while we're on this topic, if the parties were witness to how we handle this with respect to the Exelon utilities, in order to allow the utility to move more quickly with the proposal, we took a series of votes on particular issues. So on this issue, so this requires that the parties take good notes because we don't have a court reporter here today. With respect to this issue, I propose that the utilities request be denied. Without prejudice to the utility filing revised tariff sheets that specify a range which includes a floor and a cap for its various public chargers. So there would be one range for L2 charging and one range for fast charging, allowing the utility to have varying rates across its service territory. So there could be market rates as determined by this consultant. I'd rather call him or her a consultant than a vendor, because that was confusing initially. We saw the previous utilities. I believe they were allowed to change their rates every quarter. Here, OPC is requesting advance notice, 15 days to be alerted to any rate change. I don't find that to be unreasonable. So if that was clear, that's my position. Do commissioners have any objection or proposals? Commissioner O'Donnell.
Just to clarify your suggestion, which I'm supportive of, is that the utilities will have to come back with a reasonable band of rates for both sets of chargers. In other words, the commission's probably, I'll speak for this commissioner. This commissioner is not going to look kindly upon a range of a floor and a ceiling that is so wide you could drive a Mack truck through it, and therefore becomes of no effect. So I just wanted to state that and make it very clear.
I would concur as well. The range would have to be reasonable when the commission reviews that filing, but allow for some flexibility to have different rates depending on whether it's Oakland or Hagerstown. So to allow that market-based component, as Mr. Valdez just explained, perhaps the rate needs to be a little higher in some areas and a little lower to incent usage in others. Of course, the last thing I'd like is for these very expensive DC fast chargers to be installed and not used. Thank you.
No, I would support that as well. I think that the band approach and giving some ability to be flexible in location. So I support that.
Okay. All right. So seeing no objection, thank you, Commissioner Linton. the commission provides that ruling to the utility.
Thank you.
All right, back to questions. Commissioner Richard.
Yeah, I just wanted to get into a little more on the off-bill credit, and I just wanted to ask staff, as far as, is there a way that we could expedite this? Because I wanted to ask, are there issues in particular that the staff would want to review, and OPC also? And I asked that because I was interested in this concept for the PHI companies and BG, but I think it's particularly important that we consider this for PE, since, one, we did require a time of use offering, and this is something that obviously is more difficult for PE because they don't have the AMI data. And then also, given that it's important to the commission that we offer these incentives, these off-peak incentives to charging, this is something that the PE will not be able to offer initially. So again, I think it's probably particularly important that we look at how we could, expedite this off-peak, and even to the point where could we have this potentially, offer the company a chance to refile before July 31st. Is that something that the staff would be could reasonably review if they were to refile with information, and would staff be able to provide guidance as to what type of information would be needed to evaluate that program?
Well, I mean, July 31st would be a pretty quick turnaround. I believe for the PHI companies, we told them to refile.
Well, right, and like I said, there's a difference between the two groups now, and I think it's, otherwise PE will not be able to offer its ratepayers or participants in this program an incentive to charge off peak.
Sure.
And they will not be able to start collecting meaningful data for setting a time of use rate. So, given it's a pilot and we're trying to implement a state policy, to have effect by the 2025s, what is the time frame that we could do to expedite PE's request?
Well, I guess first of all, I would say there's a difference between a time of use rate and a credit. I mean, you're giving money back to the customers instead of...
I understand that, but it's some kind of an incentive to charge off peak.
Right.
So,
right.
I mean,
well, I mean, we need a lot of data to see how much these customers would be getting back from this credit. Because again, we're concerned about costs. For example, the DC fast chargers. With this, again, staff has its concerns that you're giving incentives to the same customers again, monetary incentives again.
We're trying to get the fast chargers into people's homes, and then we want people to use the feature.
Sure.
So I don't quite understand. Well, I understand what you're saying. I don't agree with it. That's a double counting. We want people to have the fast charger. We want them charged up.
Well, I would say the rebate is the reason for these customers to get these enhanced chargers so they can use the features. I would say you're kind of double dipping again. The whole reason for the $300 rebate is so they buy a more expensive L2 Smart charger so they can easily program to say only charge after midnight. It's very simple for the customers to do that. Jesus. I have an EV. I set my car to charge at 2 a.m. So again, when you're doing this, I would say that incentive should probably go to customers who aren't already receiving a rebate for the charger, because that rebate is so you use the enhancements of that charger.
So are you saying that the staff really, it's not getting the information, it's the staff that basically disagrees with the approach, and you're already just establishing that no matter what is filed at this point, you will disagree with
not necessarily.
Bill credit.
We need to see how much the customers are getting back. Is it effective? Would a standard time of use rate be more effective? We're getting we should be getting plenty of data from the other utilities, but if PE, with these chargers, they will be able to receive the data again on charging habits.
But will it be meaningful data? Because if people aren't also getting the incentive to charge off peak, then it's not really an apples to apples comparison.
Well,
I mean, yes, they have the feature, but they're not being incentivized like a time of use rate would incentivize.
I guess, again, I would say the rebate is the incentive to get this charger, but I would say any data is useful if we see that these customers are buying these more expensive smart chargers and not using the features and are charging on peak. I would say that as a result that this pilot can provide us. That would say, hey, we actually do need incentives, or we need a lot more customer outreach and education to teach these customers that, hey, it's more important to charge off peak.
Okay, but until we actually implement some kind of a program with an incentive,
Mhm.
we won't know this.
Well-
We won't get this data. Is that correct? Is that what you're saying?
Not necessarily. I mean, we have the time of use rates in the other utilities, and if PE's data starts coming back that says nobody's charging off peak because they don't understand that they should, or because there's no incentive, I think that's also a result. You don't need to give the incentive to find out if there is a result.
Okay.
You understand?
And also to the concern of PE that they will not have the needed data to actually establish a time of use rate.
Well, they will be getting the data from these chargers because they're Wi-Fi enabled and are sharing data with PE. Now, because I know they don't have AMI meters, but these chargers will be providing the data to PE.
But these are users without any kind of incentive to use the features.
Right, but they will be charging PE with the data of when these customers are charging.
I don't think Mr. McCullough is going to give you the answer.
No,
to that.
I know. Well, that's what I guess. It sounds like the staff has already made their mind up on.
Well, I would say we
so-
haven't made up our mind on these. Again,
Okay.
Pepco's going to provide more information on theirs. PE's is a little different. Theirs is a net credit, which
Okay.
I would say is more beneficial. It definitely saves
Let,
costs.
let me interject. Mr. McCullough mentioned that the company has not specified how it got to its number, and I believe it was 4 cents per kilowatt hour for the off-bill credit. And as I stated a few weeks ago at the other EV administrative meeting where we touched on the Exelon companies, I don't think it's a bad idea, but here we have no support. How did the utility get to 4 cents?
That was done initially as a high-level analysis for budgeting purposes and to determine what type of credit would an average customer need in order to provide some type of incentive. Granted, if someone was getting a dollar credit, it didn't really seem to provide enough incentive. But initially using our analysis at 4 cents, that was about $10 per month. That seemed to be in the range. We have been looking at the on and off peak ratios since then, but that seemed to be about the range to provide customers enough incentive to shift their usage to off peak.
Okay, so this, at the end of the day, this is more of a gut check as to 1 cent is not enough, but 7 might be too much, so 4 is. That being said, I think the commission does need some more information. Were we planning? I recognize that the utility is now withdrawing this proposal from consideration today. Was the utility planning to provide any of this information in its filing on August the 1st?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
We were still evaluating it. We wanted to see how today went.
Okay, all right. Well, since it's off the table now, the utility is without prejudice to making a filing that fully supports the off-bill credit, and we'll take that up in due course, depending on how quickly or slowly the utility decides to act.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I guess we informally opined on this in the last round, but it was my sense that we generally liked the concept of the off-bill. We just needed more information.
That's correct.
I mean,
Well,
is it possible we could just informally, or not, or maybe more formally, say we like the concept of off-bill and encourage utilities to get back with us soon with a filing, and we would expedite its consideration. Is that something
I think
we
that's
would
what I
entertain?
just
Okay.
said that. But I would let the other commissioners speak for themselves, and since we no longer have a live proposal before the commission today on this topic.
My understanding is that's generally where we left it with the other utilities, and supportive here. There's some differences here, but I think commissioners generally are open to the idea and would be interested in you satisfying staff's information needs and getting something, if the utility thinks it's prudent, back to us as soon as you can, so that staff can start looking at it. And OPC.
Thank you. Yeah, just to add on to that, Commissioner O'Donnell, I was also looking forward to hearing more about it in the August 1st semi-annual filing, which is what was written in the company's filing. But if it's off the table now, then I guess we'll just have to wait until it comes back.
I had a question regarding Potomac Edison's involvement in EVIC. Can you give us some information as to where they're involved right now, particularly with respect to the siting of public chargers? Mr. Zucca, if you'd like to take the other podium or swap with Mr. Valdez.
I think Ray and I can share. Good morning, Commissioners. So Potomac Edison has attended recent EVIC meetings as a member of the public. There has been some discussion on siting of public chargers. The biggest consideration we have, Mr. Chairman, you mentioned that there are no public chargers west of Hagerstown. That is true. There is a Tesla supercharger in that area, and there's some planned chargers by other companies, but that corridor is really going to be our biggest target for DC fast chargers, and that was informed through the EVIC process, and that's going to be a big part of our plan.
Have you begun any outreach with local municipalities, counties, towns?
Absolutely. So we have been doing that with our internal external affairs team. We've had discussions with a number of municipalities, most of the counties in our service territory. Namely, we've had discussions with the city of Frederick for a good portion of the last year. We've also talked with Frederick County, Montgomery County, Carroll County, Allegheny County, the city of Frostburg State University. And some of these municipalities and counties have given us preliminary locations where they would like to see both Level 2 and DC fast charging locations, and we've started a preliminary review of how those would connect to our system in those areas. Once the program is further along, we will make sure that we've reached out to every one of the counties and municipalities in our territory to see what their interest is in our program.
Thank you. And you have a representative who's attending the EVIC meetings regularly?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just also pick up on the EVIC? I was really glad to see that as part of your presentation, your coordination with EVIC. Are you also working with EVIC and the public education aspects and just the overall branding and ensuring that the Maryland is highlighted? The EVIC branding is also highlighted in your program.
Correct. Yeah, we have shared our communication plan with the EVIC, and we have committed to, as we develop more of those materials, our marketing materials, to share those with that group, as well as the working group here, the PC44 working group. And we're definitely very open to coordinating those materials with the EVIC and the other utilities.
Okay, so the company is aware of the MarylandEV.org website, and what we did learn last time is the PHI company, obviously the Exelon companies, are working with the same vendor, in fact, that created the MarylandEV.org branding and websites. So is that something that PE is also, I guess, looking at to the same level as the Exelon companies, to the same degree as the Exelon companies?
Not to this point, but
okay.
The utility is definitely very open to working with them to coordinate.
Okay, great, because that is something that EVIC has created, the MarylandEV.org. So I think that's important that we have some uniformity and consistency in the state program. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Any additional questions before we proceed to the final rulings? Okay, seeing none. The utility has agreed to modify its tariff to allow a flat $300 rebate consistent with the Commission's prior rulings. I would urge my colleagues to support a flat $300 rebate. In addition, with respect to the ratio of public chargers, I believe at this time, as the utility is still trying to educate itself and figure out where to best site these, it's reasonable to have, as staff recommends, a cap of no more than 50. 20 of the 59 being DC fast chargers. And the utility could always return to the Commission if it believes that 20 is not the right number, and the Commission will reevaluate the effect on the cost to ratepayers. So I believe those are the only two outstanding rulings required at this time. The Commissioners in support. Commissioner Richard.
Yes.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Yes.
Commissioner Linton.
Yes, and just for clarification, you said it was a cap of 20.
Correct.
Yes.
Commissioner Herman.
Yes.
Thank you. Do the parties, so those two requests and modifications to your tariff should be made and refiled. Do the parties request any additional rulings from the Commission?
Just one point of clarification.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, in the first ruling, the company was directed to file a tariff sheet with reasonable floor, a reasonable floor and cap. We would also ask for work papers or any documents to substantiate that initial filing, as well as then documents and work papers with subsequent notice that the company may provide.
I think that goes without saying that they'll provide some support, so I don't think we need an additional ruling here. What was the second part about the notice?
It sounded like the commission was in favor of the 15-day notice request, and we would just also similarly ask for documents and work papers too.
Well, that's a little different, right? That you were only asking for notice of the change. I have to think about that. What says the utility?
So it's my understanding that under the revised approach, we would include the rates on our website, change them every quarter, but have the range in our tariff that the
Yeah, if the range is already approved and they're changing the rate within the range, why would they need to support that, right?
Okay, I
It's an-
misunderstood
is it-
that.
okay, all right,
So
so-
as long as the changes within those.
Right, if they're seeking to raise rates outside of their tariff range, they would have to come back and support in that case.
Understood.
Okay. Right, anything else on this matter?
Let me ask staff a question. Staff recommends that the commission accept the tariff pages for filing with modifications staff as proposed to be effective 31 July 2019 and direct PE to file clean copies of the revised tariff. That's your recommendation in your buck sheet.
Yes.
Is that consistent with any modification? Is that still consistent with any modifications we've made up here today? Or do I need to modify the motion that I'm about ready to make?
I would say the varying the price by location, staff did not agree within the buck sheet, so I would imagine the commission would have to make that change.
Okay,
I think that was the only thing.
I thought so too. I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, as Commissioner O'Donnell clarifies his motion, I am personally excited as the utilities roll out their EV infrastructure programs. We saw the three other large IOUs in the state kick off their programs on July 1st, this past Monday. They received some relatively good press in the news that I was reading, and their programs are now open for business. The rebates, they each have 3 separate EV websites where customers could go in, apply for rebates. Building owners could apply for the MUD rebates. And I know the other utilities are well on their way to having their public chargers installed by the end of the year. So I wish you well on that.
Thank you.
I'm consulting with my attorney.
Very good. I'll continue to stall for time.
Say modification made by the commission in its July 3rd administration.
That's what I already got, yes.
Okay.
That's what I'm going to do.
Okay, this is what happens when we wing it from the bench, but I hope that the parties find it more efficient to get a determination earlier rather than later. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Mr. Chairman, I move the commission accept the tariff pages for filing with the modifications made by staff in its comments dated June 24th, 2019, except as modified by the commission during this administrative meeting, and direct the company to file clean copies of the revised tariff pages with an effective date of July 31st, 2019.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion is approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
The last item on the administrative agenda is Washington Gas Light Company filed on June 4, 2019, request for expedited authorization to substitute 2019 Stride 2 projects, case number 9486.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Annette Garofalo again. Washington Gas Light Company seeks authorization to defer one project on its commission-approved 2019 Stride 2 project list and to substitute one new project. in its place. Both the deferred and the substituted STRIDE distribution projects are Program 3 vintage mechanically coupled main and services from years 52 to 56 and 62 to 65. The currently approved project, BCA number 247320, has the lowest priority in the approved 2019 project list, and the company has experienced delays resulting from easement procurement. The company would like to defer the project to calendar year 2020. WGL has concluded that its proposed substitute should be expedited due to directly observed changing field conditions, an updated risk analysis, the timing of construction in the area, and the eligibility of this main and service material in the STRIDE plan overall. The substituted project would have an estimated start date of July 1, 2019, and an estimated completion date of November 30th, 2019, including final paving restoration. The newly proposed project is part of a larger project in which only 700 feet of plastic main to remediate 339 feet vintage mechanically coupled steel main and 5 service lines qualified as STRIDE eligible at an estimated cost of $209,734. The remainder of the project will be installed, but on a non-STRIDE basis. The substitution on the 2019 STRIDE 2 project list revises that revenue requirement to a total of $3,386,639, a reduction of $4,012. The company's monthly surcharge caps have slightly decreased for all non-residential customer classes. The company's proposed project substitution results in a decrease of 1 cent per month and 7 cents per month to the GMA non-heating, non-cooling, and the interruptible classes, respectively. Staff recommends the Commission approve WGL's request to defer the requested project on its Commission-approved 2019 STRIDE 2 project list and to substitute the project, and staff further recommends the Commission direct the company to charge the revised rates effective July 3rd, 2019, as shown in Table 4 of staff's comments. No revised tariff is needed because WGL's STRIDE tariff contains an algorithm for devising rates, but no actual rates that need to be changed.
Oh, that makes it easy. Formula rates effectively. Thank you, Ms. Garofalo, and thank you for the team. I recognize we have accounting investigations,
Rain Trust is back there.
engineering, and TGW. So thank you for that thorough analysis, particularly of the surcharges. Counsel for Washington Gas.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. John Dodge appearing on behalf of Washington Gas. Nothing to add. We add our thanks for the staff's diligence in this matter, also for OPC's qualified support of the project, and we thank the Commission for turning these around so quickly for us.
Thank you. OPC did have an interesting filing, so Counsel for Office of People's Counsel.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Nothing in addition to add to our filed comments, but available for questions if you have any.
Thank you. I found your comments, as Mr. Dodge just said, qualified support, but I found it very interesting, and I appreciate your taking the time to submit them, because I felt more enlightened after understanding OPC's position, notwithstanding the fact that the substitution would only reduce, I think, was it mains by 200 feet or so?
That's about right.
So relatively small, but I could see the larger issue that you were pointing out to the Commission. So thank you. I do not have any questions. Do Commissioners have questions? Commissioner Linton.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one for Washington Gas. Just in light of the qualified support that the People's Counsel has offered in this case, I wanted to see if the company had a response to it. I understand that from the financial and numbers perspective and the miles, or in this case feet of pipe perspective, it's not much of a difference. But there is a certain assertion underneath that may become an issue in the future. So I just thought I'd like to hear a comment from you.
Thank you. I wasn't going to rise to the bait, but I guess I have to. OPC raised 3 concerns in its comments. The first was that the project substitution will result in replacement of less eligible infrastructure. That is literally true on its face.
Mr. Dodge, excuse me, could you get the microphone a little closer to you?
Hopefully that's better. Hard to believe I would not want to be heard, knowing my background. As I was saying, that the net change in the substitution is a reduction of just a few hundred feet of main pipe and only 24 services, which reflects a reduction of 0.3% and 0.5% respectively from our project list that was approved. The estimated cost, as you've already heard, is going down by 0.2%. So we do have an issue of materiality here. Given the way that these programs work, these reductions may be offset by gains in other projects that we finish by the end of this year. So I guess I would say that while literally possible, we think that OPC's concerns are simply overstated and don't reflect a larger trend for our Stride 2 program. After this substitution, we will replace 18.6 miles of main, which is 98% of the 19 miles that we originally presented in our Stride 2 application. We do note that OPC incorrectly calculated their percentage by subtracting contingent main only from one side of the equation. Small matter, but it does impact their results. OPC fails to recognize that the number of services on the 2019 project list is approximately 1/3 greater than the number presented in our original application. I think we had 100 in the original application, we have 132 now, so the reduction is starting from a higher amount than we originally projected for the 2019 project list. Their second concern regards the new project scope, includes more ineligible main than Stride eligible main. We see this as conflating two different issues. The Piney Branch BCA does retire about 340 feet of mechanically coupled steel main, but the comparison to the 700 feet of installed PVC pipe is inappropriate. That greater length of new plastic pipe is driven by the construction site. The purple line is going right down the same road, and prudence dictates that we put in more line to avoid the impacts of that construction. We would otherwise have to, as I understand it, dig a lot deeper and go a lot further if we didn't take this approach, and that would be more expensive for our customers, and we'd rather not do that. Finally, OPC stated that the request is driven by project accounting rather than program strategy. That is flatly wrong. It's an assertion. There's no facts to back it up. We are using our field observations for this area, and we're knocking off the lowest ranked project in favor of what has become a higher ranked project. We're doing exactly what the statute and this commission have directed us to do. It is a relative risk program, and we are simply executing that in our best engineering judgment. So with that, again, we're grateful for OPC's support. We disagree with some of their analysis, and we don't think it reflects a larger trend in the 2019 program.
Okay, so just to be clear, this was not an accounting trick that the company was trying to utilize to recover assets faster.
If it is, it's a pretty poor one because we are charging ratepayers less money as a result of this. We are lowering the project cost by about $90,000, and we're recovering $4,200 less in the revenue requirement. So it simply doesn't make sense that this is an accounting trick when we're substituting a less costly project of higher risk for a lower cost project of lower risk. It just doesn't make sense.
Thank you.
Well, if nothing less, you now know Mr. O'Loughlin's game plan in the event you attempt to make a substitution or swap of greater materiality.
Understood, Your Honor.
And you had your arguments ready, so I appreciate that. I appreciate both counsel and staff again for its rigorous review of the surcharge corrections, which I understand, Mr. Dodge, you have no objection to, the 1 cent and 7 cent reductions.
We had not included that originally because of materiality. We thought the reconciliation would take care of that, but we're willing to go along with staff's suggestion. It's $4,200. We're going to do it.
4,200 total. Okay, very, very good.
What's the revision?
It's already baked in, but it changed. So it's, yeah. Seeing no additional questions, is there a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. For item number 8, I move we approve the company's request to defer one project on its commission-approved 2019 STRIDE project list, Program 3, BCA number 247320, Hollow Glen Phase 2, and to substitute one new project, Program 3, BCA number 292080, Piney Branch Road at Flower Branch Apartments, Silver Spring, Maryland, in its place, and direct the company to file clean copies of the tariff pages reflecting the adjusted surcharges proposed by staff in its comments dated June 21st, 2019, to be effective July 3rd, 2019.
All in favor?
Your Honor, before you
Yes.
take the vote, staff did mention in his comments that we do not need to file revised tariff pages.
Oh, yes, the
But-
formula, correct.
Revised rates would be.
Revised rates go into effect, but no need to file any tariff sheets.
Correct.
Okay, so that,
I'll strike that. Strike that
Okay.
from my motion.
we'll strike that from the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion is approved. Hope everybody has a safe 4th of July weekend. This meeting is adjourned.